Okay.
Oh, a very, very, very good afternoon to you all. My name is Frank Njenga, and are, for the time being anyway, the co-chair of the mental health task force that was inaugurated in December of last year. The inauguration of the task force followed a clear and very loud statement by His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta on the 1st of June 2019 in Narok, in which he stated, and I quote, depression has today become a common phenomenon and it affects persons from all walks of life and ages. I urge employers and institutions of learning to invest more time and resources in monitoring and facilitating the mental well-being of their charges. I therefore, he's continued, direct the Ministry of Health in consultation with county government, ministries of education, labor and social protection, and public service, youth and gender affairs to formulate an appropriate policy response. Now, this afternoon, we have a number of experts who are members of the task force itself, who will talk to us through some of the things that we came across during this very interesting and trying times. The first speaker will be our very own Professor Lukoye Atuole, who is well known to many of you attending today. He is a psychiatrist, most recently working as the Dean in the Faculty of Medicine at Moi University. He's also a well recognized and acknowledged expert with appointments as a teacher here in Kenya, as well as the United States and South Africa. He's an eloquent advocate of mental health, and at least I look forward to hearing his presentation. The second speaker who will be talking to us is Dr. Oscar Gedua, a well-respected psychologist, prominent member of the mental health task force. He teaches forensic psychology at USIU, where he is an assistant professor of psychology. I think I also saw Dr. Njuguna around with us. Dr. Simon Njuguna is the director of mental health, and I'm sure he will have one or two things to say. Dr. Njuguna led the secretariat. And in case I forget to say so later on today, Dr. Njuguna's team did a sterling job, and really it is on account of his able leadership and the participation of his other members that has really brought to us to where we are today, which is a webinar discussing this particular report. Before I give the floor to our distinguished panelists, let me myself, because I was there, say one or two things, perhaps about the background of where we find ourselves today. As I said in my introductory remarks, it was the president himself who finally gave voice to the millions of Kenyans who have, over the decades, suffered, if you like, under the weight of the challenges that come with persons with mental health needs. When he spoke that June in Naivasha, in Narok, our view was that since our cries joint cries had reached the highest office in the land, we had finally found a position where we could finally put mental health issues on the discussion table. It's very significant that a few months later, we were told in November, mental health as a subject found a discussion in cabinet. And we, as a task force, are the result of the directive arrived at by cabinet. Now, excuse me, brother. The activities of the task force followed very quickly after that. We were given only 80 days to do what we were required to do. Now, 80 days, as you know, is not a very long time. And what we did was to select cases that we could and would visit right across the country in a representative nature. We also called out to people to send us written memoranda, and these included professional bodies, county government, individuals, people in the armed forces, really very, very many. And at the end of the day, we had hundreds of memoranda, and we met large groups of people from everywhere in the country. And we, as a task force, believe that whatever it is that we will be telling you, we were told by Kenyans, is really what was going on in the minds of our people. We were encouraged further by the reality that when the BBI group went around the country, whether you like them or not, they were told exactly the same things as we were told. And that, in a sense, encouraged us, because a group that had gone around the country ostensibly to seek views and opinions about the politics of our country came back and made a recommendation in our very field of mental health. And indeed, one of the recommendations that Professor Twoli will be talking about is around the assessment and measurement of the happiness of our country. And we were gratified to see that the BBI people had also seen it fit and appropriate to monitor the mental health and well-being of our people. Now, we have and we'll be having these webinars over the next couple of weeks. I think 11 chapters in this report, and the intention is that we will have the different experts talk to you through the various and different chapters over the coming weeks and days. So as of today, we will start. If you've got your report in your hand, and I suspect some of you have got them in soft copy, we will start with the two subjects of what is wellness and well-being, which will be presented to us by Professor Atwoli. And then we will look and focus at chapter 2, which will be presented by Oscar Gedua. And then we will open the afternoon to Q&A. The reason we're doing it in this format is because we hope and believe that all of you present today have already read the report or in the process of reading the report. And what we are really looking forward to doing is to engage you all, fellow Kenyans, so that we can understand what, if any, issues you have, either in agreement or disagreement. Both are most welcome with the findings of our report. With those introductory words, allow me to request Professor Lukoya Atwoli to speak to you, his people. Professor Atwoli.
Thank you very much, Frank, for the kind introduction. This afternoon, I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through individual areas within the report, but I think I'll spend a couple of minutes framing some of the terms which many people are aware of, and then I'm more inclined to focus on the area of happiness because it is a huge section and a huge thread running through the entire report. When we went around the country and when we looked at the state of mental health in the country, many Kenyans indicated that there were reasons why people were unhappy, and that if the government dedicated itself to the task of finding out why people are not happy and doing something to reduce that unhappiness, then everything else would be improved. You know, happier people are more productive, more healthy, and so it becomes an area that we need to track in order for us to be able to ensure that many more people are mentally healthy. But before going into that, I think it's important for us to appreciate what mental health is. And we have a consensus around mental health that it is a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities and can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. So this is important. This is a definition from the World Health Organization that says mental health is not just absence of mental illness, but it is a positive state of well-being where you realize your own abilities, you can cope with the normal stresses of life, you're productive and fruitful, and you're able to contribute to your community. Very important concept. So this is one thing that we used as a basis of the work that we're doing. Mental well-being is an active and dynamic process of becoming aware and making choices towards a healthy and fulfilling life in different dimensions. So well-being goes beyond thinking about health, but also just feeling good about yourself and making choices that result in you feeling good about yourself. So I thought I would do that, but as far as happiness is concerned then, I'm going to share a few ideas around happiness as we conceive them to be. And our working definition was derived from what I have put up here, that happiness is a mental or emotional state of well-being that is defined by positive or pleasant emotions ranging from contentment to intense joy. So happy mental states also reflect judgments by a person about their overall well-being, and I have just talked about well-being. So it is important for us to appreciate that a happy person is a person who's not only mentally satisfied and feeling good, but is a person who's also physically, socially, emotionally, feeling good about themselves. So the happiness index is a development philosophy that, as well as an index, which is used to measure collective happiness in a nation. So you collect a lot of data, and I'll show you what kinds of data are collected, that then gives you an aggregate measure of how happy people are this year compared to last year, and how happy people are in this region compared to another region. It was first used in the Kingdom of Bhutan in 1979, and subsequently the World Happiness Report is this measure of happiness and is published by the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network. The UN General Assembly 10 years ago passed a resolution inviting member countries to measure the happiness of their people and to use this to help guide their public policies, and declared 20th March the International Day of Happiness to recognize the relevance of happiness and well-being as universal goals, as a thing that we should be working towards. And so now, according to the World Happiness Report for the year 2016-2018, it ranked 156 countries. Finland was at the top of that list, while Kenya was ranked 121st. I'll show you a few more, some data on the more latest information. And so out of our report, if you go through our report, we made a recommendation around happiness, and we said we should carry out an annual happiness index survey. And we thought happiness can be measured by assessing an individual's emotional well-being as well as their global life situation, looking at how they live and so on. And I'll show you some of the parameters that we are proposing should be used to measure the happiness of Kenyans. And this includes the capacity to attain their goals and maintain healthy relationships, And it can promote mental well-being through influencing public policy. So by identifying things that make people unhappy, public policy can pivot towards those things, address them, and therefore increase the aggregate of national happiness. We can also identify best practices that increase happiness in government, business, schools, city planning, health systems, and other institutions in society. So this is the importance of having this survey and tracking it. And we know some of the factors that will be tracked that can be improved with time. The second recommendation we made around happiness was that there should be a mental health and happiness commission. And this is within the report. But for me, as far as happiness is concerned, this commission would be advising the national and county governments on the state of mental health and happiness in Kenya. It will be conducting this periodic survey that includes happiness and ensuring surveillance of the state of mental health and happiness in the country. So I think that is important. And anything else that we think is important to track in order to increase our happiness would be a function of this commission. So there are those two recommendations that bring together Kenya's national thinking around happiness. And these ideas came out of the hearings that we had across the country, came across looking at the literature, looking at what the United Nations recommends, and thinking around mental health globally as a team that included experts in the field. I'm showing you an excerpt of the World Happiness Report for 2020. So this is a document that's available online, and anybody can download it and go through it and see where we rank as far as happiness is concerned. I thought it is important in this panel on the right to indicate what the predictors were, the things that were being studied in order to determine whether a country is happy or unhappy. And the first item, of course, the GDP per capita in terms of purchasing power parity. And you adjust that to $2011 to some constant that everybody else can refer to. So this is the first parameter that they would look at. Where does a country rank as far as GDP per capita is concerned? That is how much wealth every individual can be attributed to every individual in a population. The second item that was being tracked was life expectancy at birth. So when you are born in this region, how long do you expect to live as opposed to another region or as opposed to another time in the life of a country? The third item was social support, which was the national average of responses to the question, if you are in trouble, do you have relatives or friends who you can count on to help you whenever you need them or not? So looking at the social support network, who can you fall back on when you're on hard times? Who can you go to when you're in difficulty and you need to cry? Who can you go to when you need some assistance in your life? The fourth parameter is the freedom to make life choices. And this is in response to the question, are you satisfied or dissatisfied with the freedom to choose what to do with your life? And there are many small things that when you ask people, there are many small things that restrict your freedoms to make certain decisions. It can be the political situation in the country. It can be the law. It can be your religious background. It can be the community in which you live. It can be disability and so many other things that the kinds of choices they can make compared to men. The fifth thing is generosity. Looking at how generous is this population. And we ask, have you donated money to a charity in the past month? How many of us have given out money for charity or for somebody else in which we do not have any interest or benefit? The sixth one is about corruption. What are the perceptions of corruption in your
It looks like Prof is having a bit of a problem, but he's back now. No, he's only just back. We'll see if he's able to continue. If he's not,
whether it is widespread throughout government, because it also affects your
Lukoye, just a comment, Lukoye. We can just about go back to number 6.
Okay, I will go back to number 6. Yes, I'm sorry. Somebody was actually trying to call on the gadget that was providing the network. So
okay, sawa.
Yeah. So after generosity, I was talking about perceptions of corruption in the country. And this is in response to the question, is corruption widespread throughout government or not? And it is important to track this because when people perceive corruption to be a widespread problem, it affects their happiness because it restricts their freedom and their choices. It interferes with their wealth and the GDP growth. It interferes with the life expectancy or social support. You start looking at things differently when you want to make certain decisions. The seventh thing then that is directly related to happiness is positive affect. That is how happy you are over the past, period that is described within the survey itself. So it can be within the past 1 day, can be within the past 1 week, and or so on. But the question is, did you experience the following feelings a lot during the day yesterday? And then those things are measured, including happiness, laughter, enjoyment, and so on and so forth. And the final thing that is measured then is the opposite of that, which is the negative affect. And that looks like over the previous day, how much of worry have you had, sadness, anger, and so on and so forth. So these are the 8 parameters that are currently used to derive the statistics and then compare regions and countries as far as happiness is concerned. And so it's a very small print, and you'll find it in that World Happiness Report, but important is to see, yes, that Finland is at the top of the rank at number 1 on the panel on the left, and there are several countries, you see a lot of them in the north of Europe, like Denmark, Norway, and then somewhere Central Europe, and so on and so forth. So there are many countries from Europe that dominate the top of that, but then you'll find quite a number of Asian and South American countries in that list as well. On the panel on the right, that is the third set of countries. These are the ones at the bottom of the list of happiness. And if you then scroll to number 121, you'll find Kenya there, ranked 121 out of 153 countries on those various parameters. The color coding is on the various parameters that were being measured that make up the composite of this happiness index. So for 2017 to 2019, that is where we are sitting as far as this is concerned. If you look at the panel on the left on this page, again from the same report, then it looks at changes in happiness from 2008 to 2012 to 2017, 2019. So the state as at 2012 versus the state as at 2019, what kinds of changes there have been. And you'll be happy to note that Kenya is one of the countries at the bottom of this list, number 50, as far as improvement. It has improved by 0.34 points as far as the happiness index is concerned. And the aim of projecting this is to show that you can track improvement in this index over a period of time. You will remember that between 2008 and 2012, we went through a national upheaval that came just after we had been classified in the previous 5 years as among the happiest people in the world. But this period of time was a period of intense suffering for many Kenyans, and therefore it can explain why we were at the place where we were in 2008 to 2012. And it might explain why then there is some slight increase by 2019 because we have not been in the same situation as we were in 2008. But the increment is so small that then we need to ask ourselves, what more can we do to increase the aggregate national happiness in this country? And so in summary, I would posit that tracking national happiness is a powerful measure of mental well-being. And this happiness index is determined by many factors, including the economic growth of the country, social support that people have, individual emotions and freedom, poverty levels, and even corruption. Tracking happiness as a measure gives an overall score for national development and prosperity, I think much better than GDP alone, much better than any other thing that you might pick as far as economic growth is concerned. I think happiness provides an aggregate score that captures as many things as one might capture to determine whether people are happy or not. And finally then, it is our position that governments must refocus their missions and put people at the center of their agenda. And one good way of doing this is to set your goal or agenda as a government to be increasing a people's happiness. So if the government decides that we have been elected to ensure that you're happier by the time we leave office in 5 years' time, then that government will look at the factors behind this happiness index and work towards ensuring that each and every one of those factors is addressed to ensure that by the time you're measuring their performance by way of the happiness index, you see massive improvements. And if you do see massive improvements in aggregate happiness, you expect to see improvements in growth of the economy, improvements in the health sector, in education, in infrastructure, and in security of the people. I thank you very much. And I leave you with the question, are we a happy people given those parameters that I have presented? Thank you very much.
Prof, I don't know the answer to your question, but I must say I am very happy with your presentation. And I think I speak for all the participants. You have tackled a fascinating subject. And perhaps what we will do, I don't know if you can do this on Zoom, on other platforms you can, take a survey and ask all those who think we are happy, put up your hands, and those who think not, stay as you are. Priscilla, if you can get a kind of survey to see how the participants of this webinar are thinking about the question that the good professor has raised. Now, before we accept questions, perhaps let me ask Priscilla first. Priscilla, do you have any questions that are burning that you'd want Professor Atwoli to answer before we ask Oscar Gudua to speak?
So, hello everybody. Currently we are good. We can just do the questions at the end. Thank you.
What if people forget their questions? They must write them down.
They are typing them on the Q&A.
Okay, so as we go along. Okay, Oscar,
yes.
I had introduced you, assistant professor at the United States International University, an expert in forensic psychology. I now give you Professor Gudua.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Jenga. Maybe the one that you did not include, which I might be swallowed if you do not say, is that I'm also the chair of the Kenya Psychological Association. I'm very happy. Let me see, who's projecting? Is it Priscilla? Priscilla?
Yes, Joy is going to project your presentation. No, let me it now.
If what I can do, I can do it from my end, it's fine. Okay?
Okay, that's fine.
So great, thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Jenga, for that very good introduction, as well as Professor Atwoli for setting the stage, especially for us, to see why it is important for us as a people to be happy, and especially in the context of the work that we are doing as a task force, to see that by recommending the Mental Health and Happiness Commission, that we are saying that our first goal is to say if our people are happy, then our productivity as a country will also be happy. So what I would like to do then is to talk about what people said, and especially what Kenyan said, and then what our recommendations were, because I do not want to belabor the point that, of course, the burden of mental health and ill health in this country is high. The issues that we've gone through of stress and being traumatized by a lot of the things that we've gone through as a country, that all of these things have affected us so much. And instead of going back into all of that, because everyone can read the report, let me talk about what Kenyans said, in case the Kenyans who are on this call today were not there when we were there. So let me begin by sharing my screen. Thank you. All right. Great. Okay. So, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to really just go into what Kenyan said, and I'll begin by saying that it is apparent to us, and it became apparent to us as we went across the whole country in this task that has been a very, very humbling experience and really a great honor for us to serve the people of Kenya. We found out that Kenyans don't really have not only the nomenclature, but they really do not really fully grasp the question of mental health. And so therefore they cannot be able to describe what they're going through. They cannot really be able to, and also let me be fair, that it's not that they don't know how to describe what they're going through. They do know how to describe it, but it's not really framed within the question of either being well or unwell. So what you have is you end up having cultural interferences, things like watu wamerogwa, you have things like that. So therefore, what ends up happening is that people take a much longer time to seek help when they could have done that a bit sooner along the spectrum of wellness. So what am I saying? I'm saying that even in cases where people might have just required some social support or some psychotherapy or seeing a counselor, those situations deteriorate, and especially requiring someone to probably get medication or something like that, or they even become psychotic because of how far and how long they've been left alone without any support. So that's one of the things that we realized. So anyway, as we were moving on, we found out that Kenyans thought that mental health was synonymous with mental illness. So of course, our job was to really take a photograph and to see. So we realized that they did not have the difference, they did not know the difference between mental health as well as mental illness. And so we noted that as an opportunity for us to actually educate people about what that is. Then also Kenyans talked about the high levels of stress that we go through as people because of lack of jobs, and maybe because of people who are stressed within employment. And I would also venture to say that sometimes Kenyans are not only gainfully employed, they might be underemployed. So you find that someone might not really have enough work, or even if they're working, they don't have enough wages to pay them or to compensate. So this is really stressful for them, as well as managers and bosses stressing people. That was a common occurrence across the whole country. Also, we found that Kenyans said that the constant emphasis on politics by the print and electronic media increased their levels of stress. Every day hearing about political questions, political parties, political things, that was increasing their stress, that they were saying that we need to hear more news about other things like development and about our people. They also said that there's an urgent need to promote mental health in schools and families, and also to advocate for good parenting. And this is really exciting for us as a task force, because we said, look, Kenyans know the answer. We don't even need experts to come and tell people what they require, because they know that from school, that is where people can actually be captured, so to speak, to actually start talking about the language of mental health and talking about wellness in an open and a way that will not stigmatize anybody if they're having any issues, and in their families especially, where I think the giant of culture needs to be tackled from. Also, the idea of people in employment emphasizing that their bosses needed to be trained in mental health and mental health issues is really key. And you'll see in one of our recommendations, we talk about employee assistance programs, which offer the whole spectrum of psychosocial and psychological, as well as mental health services across the spectrum. Then also, the Kenyans decried that mental health services are hardly accessible. This is one thing that we saw across the whole country, and where they were accessible, they were not up to standards. I'm happy that I think in the near future, I can venture to say we're going to see the increase and the betterment of the quality of standards of mental health services in this country as we move along. Also, because of that access being hard, it hinders that follow-up that people have. So you find that people will either go when they're really in a crisis, and after the crisis is averted, they don't really follow up. And so therefore, that actually does not really help to shield their mental wellness really well. So what did we recommend after we saw all of that? We started by saying that the law, and on the day when we talk about policy and law, you'll see how the law and policy really marry to really, can marry to actually help us as a nation. But then we started by saying that the Constitution of Kenya guarantees every citizen access to the highest attainable health, to guarantee their physical, mental, and social well-being, and that includes mental health care. So it's in the Constitution. We have a very good document which has not really been followed, because we found that our system really caters mostly to physical health and not really mental wellness. So therefore, we're saying that our very first recommendation, of course, is that we have to follow the Constitution and not continue flouting what it actually asks us to hold up. This also shows that it leads to a lot of stigma being placed on people who are suffering any form of mental illness, or anybody who might have any mental distress, because not everybody might have a diagnosable condition. However, if we have any stress or distress, the stigma attached to saying it is really much higher in this country. Okay. Great. I can see a poll. Are you happy? Please vote even as I continue talking. And I know that I'm not allowed to vote, so So yeah, please continue. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Doc, for that. All right. So what did we say? 7 recommendations really fast. The first one, to declare mental health an emergency of epidemic proportions. There was thinking around this that was actually pretty, it's not foreign, it does not come from another planet, because when the second president of this country declared HIV/AIDS an epidemic in this country, because of his insistence of it being an emergency in this country, that is why we've been able to fight that scourge, and all the way from 13.5 prevalence levels to about 4.6 currently from the last count. So we have to stand, starting from the head of state. Luckily for us, His Excellency the President spoke about it already last year in June, and he continues to speak about it candidly, and that's why this task force was formed, and the work we've done was done. Also, we recommend as a task force the establishment of amenities and facilities to provide recreational activities for the public. We are saying no more land grabbing for that land that actually is required for people to actually have parks and recreational facilities where people can actually go and exercise, take walks, okay? It actually improves people's mental health. So this is not even a professional suggestion. It's really just about the way we have designed our country is not good for mental health. If we live in a concrete jungle, people's health will not end up to the happiness that Professor Atwoli was talking about. Number 3, develop fully fledged wellness centers in learning institutions with psychologists in them. As a psychologist, I'm proud today to say that as a task force, we really did focus on things to do with psychologists and counselors as well, on top of the other models of helping within the mental health system. And we were saying that if we can actually have the Ministry of Health and Ministry of Education partner, that all the institutions of learning and all places where learning happens can actually be staffed with a qualified psychologist and a counselor to actually help with the well-being of people. It also will reduce the stigma of seeking mental health services. So in terms of the spectrum of help that we actually do see people go through, it can be arrested before it becomes a bit too much. Also, number 4, promote mental health and wellness in families. We said that we can use the existing structures instead of relying on new ones or building new ones. And the Nyumba Kumi, if it can be revitalized, to actually also have this component of wellness in it. Also with community health volunteers who are in our communities, we can actually promote mental health in families through giving education, through talking with people, through doing triaging at the community level. This can really help us to promote our health and mental health and wellness. Number 5, to encourage and promote physical fitness in communities, workplaces, and schools. Moving is a really good, is really good medicine. Of course, if you start having your endorphins shooting up because of working out, you will be able to avert a lot of the mental unwellness that can actually come your way if you do not, or if you became sedentary. Also, we're saying that mental health is everybody's business. At this point, it will actually really help us if everybody is talking about mental health and everybody gives their experience. And this is really key, especially in reducing stigma in this country. So therefore, everybody will talk. And I like what Dr. Njenga talked about earlier. During that cabinet meeting, what we were told was that every cabinet secretary spoke about their experience with mental health issues, whether it's their own family, whether it's people they know. And this is really great for us as a country, because if our top leadership can start engaging in that conversation, it means then we will be able to actually destigmatize whatever might happen with people who get any disorder, or even people who might have any distress. Finally, which is what Professor Atwoli was talking about, we recommend that we should be carrying out an annual happiness index survey, which will be carried out, of course, by the National Mental Health and Happiness Commission, which will actually be tracking the wellness of Kenyans moving forward. I think because this is self-explanatory, you can read it inside the report, but it's my tremendous honor to be able to take us through this this afternoon. Thank you so much. Over to you back, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ari, for excellent. Oh, is that your car? Yeah.
It's my aspiration. I'll be very happy.
Yeah. Okay, Priscilla, we have seen Dr. Gedua's cars. Maybe before we take any the questions, I see Simon Juguna, our very able leader of the Secretariat in our presence. Simon, do you have anything you'd like to say as we take the questions? The floor is yours.
So thank you, Chair, and the panelists and the audience in this webinar today. I only have one message that the task force did some very good work. They did this for the Kenyans, and we are looking forward towards the implementation of these task force reports. It will have many steps. There will be some legal reforms. There will be administrative reform. There will be policy agendas in the implementation. And we invite all Kenyans to engage in these discussions and see how best we can implement this. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Priscilla. We are now ready to take questions. And what I'd suggest you do, Priscilla, is you shoot the questions directly to the people who will answer them. Don't pass them.
Okay.
Okay, please send them straight.
Okay. So can start with Prof. Lukwere. So there are pretty many questions. I'll try and just go step by step. So the first one is, how can we mitigate unhappiness at individual levels?
Yeah, I think at individual level, there are many things that people can do to improve their state of happiness. But I think at the outset, I must emphasize what we have said, that a person alone cannot have a significant effect on their own state of happiness, and that the entire system has to be geared towards improving collective happiness. When everybody around you is unhappy, it is difficult for you to sustain a state of happiness. And therefore, we should be aiming at ensuring that as many people as possible have the opportunity to experience happiness, and that too, participating in that process of making life better and easier for the people in your community contributes to your own personal happiness as well. So I would put that at almost at the top of the list, that if you want to be happy, do as much as you can to make everybody around you happy, and your happiness will increase. The other things, I think Oscar has mentioned them, including being healthy, physical health, taking care of your physical health, exercise, trying as much as possible to eat healthy, getting physical exercise, having family and friends around you that you can, fall back on when you need support, and so on. But importantly, the message to those that control resources is to deploy those resources in a manner that increases the aggregate happiness of the population. And the people will not have trouble finding ways of maintaining their own happiness when we do that.
Another question on happiness, I'll give you like 2, 3 together. So there's what is the over influence of politics as a key factor that affects happiness? What is the place of spiritual framework and networks in mental health and holistic well-being? So you could, and there was also a question of where they can get the happiness index so that they can assess themselves, the tools for themselves and for the general public. Yes.
Okay. I'll begin with the first one, the place of politics. I think in our report, we noted and we heard from the people that our politics is toxic, that our politics drives people more in the direction of unhappiness than happiness. It doesn't matter who you support or how you support them or what you do. Following our politics drives a lot of people into despair and into unhappiness. And many people pleaded with those that are interested in politics to have their people's happiness at the forefront, so that no matter what you do, no matter what you achieve as a politician, that you can sit back and look back and say, I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things to make my people happy, rather than to make sure I get elected, rather than to make sure I become wealthy, rather than to make sure I become more powerful, but to look at things that you did as a leader to make people happier. And perhaps then people will stop looking at politics as something that drives them into unhappiness. Politics has a huge role because politics determines allocation of resources. Politics determines whether your GDP will grow or go down. It determines whether you will have good health services and infrastructure in your neighborhood. It determines whether you'll have green spaces where you can go and spend some time and get fresh air and do exercise and eat well, it determines whether you have a shilling in your pocket to ensure that you have a good life. And so those we put into political positions and those who aspire to political leadership, if they put the people's happiness at the forefront of their agenda, then it will be that much easier to address everything else. So whoever asked the question, I think it is true that politics is an important driver to collective happiness in a country. Spirituality is an aspect of our culture, is an aspect of the traditions that many people follow, and it can play both a positive and a negative role as far as happiness is concerned. A positive role is derived mostly from the fact that people engage in spiritual practices in groups, and having a group that supports you, having a group that you believe the same thing together, having a group that you are focused on a higher aspiration together, and therefore you do things beyond what your own basic needs are, increases your happiness. Having a group that you can take your problems to, even if they're not spiritual, improves your degree of happiness and your chance at happiness. But on the negative side, there are certain religious or spiritual practices that then restrict your freedom to choose things that would make you happy. There are some that impose certain demands on an individual and therefore make it more difficult for that individual to be happy. There are some that are focused on philosophies that glorify unhappiness, and therefore a person feels guilty when they are happy, and so on and so forth. So there is a dual role for this spirituality and religion as far as happiness is concerned. And an individual needs to, first of all, have an eye on what they think would make them happy, what they enjoy doing, and then look for spiritual beliefs that would promote that, look for groups that promote that, and perhaps spend more time on those than on those that diminish your happiness. Where you can find the happiness index. So right now, it is not an individual measure. It is a measure that is done at a national level and compares many countries. And this is done in many ways. First, there's data on GDP that's available publicly. Then there are questions that are asked in a Gallup international poll on wellness that asks you the set of questions that I projected. And then they sum up the scores and do an average for the people that they have interviewed. And then they compare the different countries, how they have performed on that scale. We believe that this can be done within the country, comparing the different regions. It can be done within the country, comparing the counties. And then you can start seeing where are you most likely to be happy if you lived or was born in this country. I hope that has answered those questions.
Thank you so much. We have many questions. Thank you for the questions. Keep them coming. So we can move to Dr. Gidua. We have a question on why the professional bodies in the psychological association would, to be nice if they would come together. So they're asking why they are not working together. Another is the question to you is, where do you factor counselors and psychologists in the implementation of this report? And another question that you could also answer is narcissism a mental health term? And why is there little support for victims and nobody seems to believe them, either at the domestic front or at the workplace? Thank you. Let's start with that, Dr. Gidua.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Priscilla, for that question. I think I'll start with the last question about narcissism. And I think narcissism is a psychological term, or at least a mental health term, which is concerned, or it is actually related to a personality. And of course, since this is not a psychology class or a psychiatry class, I will not go into definitions as specific as that, but I can say it is tied in with our personality disorder, especially. It is unfortunate, of course, because it's very hard sometimes to treat personality disorders, and it is really specialized treatment that is required. And maybe that is why somebody might find that they're not getting the support they require. However, I'd like to ask the person who asked the question, if this is your personal experience, please do not give up. Please go and look for help. There are many qualified people who can help you with this, to at least work with you to support you in what your personal experience is. Now, let me talk about the place of psychologists and counselors in this report. I am so excited as I speak right now, because I think that our country is now cognizant of the serious role that psychologists and counselors have played in this role in this country, especially with helping people. And our visibility became very obvious, especially after a lot of the attacks that have happened in this country, which were unfortunate by terror groups starting from as far back as 1998 during the US Embassy attack, and then, of course, coming to Westgate and all of that. The place of counselors and psychologists is really key, and especially the team we worked with. And I'll tell, for the counselors and psychologists out there, I know the talk that has always been that, oh, you know, the task force is skewed towards psychiatrists, or, you know, it's a medical model, it's not counseling, it's not psychology. I really want to talk to my colleagues, and especially my friends and my brothers and sisters who are psychologists. We belong to a spectrum of care. And especially when we talk about a multidisciplinary approach to care, we have to start embracing the idea that we will work with a mental health nurse, with a psychiatrist, we're going to work with medical doctors, we're going to work with other specialists to actually better the care of our clients. We are not the end all be all of all our clients. And that is a fact that I think we need to really take seriously. And especially if you want to move the mental health system ahead, that is where we have to begin. That's number one. Number two, the place of psychologists and counselors cannot be denied, because we have talked, especially in the chapter of the laws, we have our act, which was actually enacted in 2014, which has never been actualized. And one of the things we are asking for, and we've been clamoring for the longest time, is the formation of the Board of Counselors and Psychologists in Kenya. This will happen because we've actually said it very clearly in this report, because without it, we cannot regulate the profession. Now, about the last question about why people don't work together, honestly, I'm the wrong person to ask that question, because I think that, in as far as I'm concerned, we've been really working very well. The leaders of all of them, including the organization that I belong to, Kenya Psychological Association, we've been really working together with other heads of organizations. We've become friends. In fact, as a matter of fact, we decided we're going to be having executive committee meetings together and really talk about how do we help Kenyans, because these outfits were not made for ourselves. They're not personal property, and we need to really help Kenyans together as psychologists and professionals. So I can tell you right now for a fact that narrative is dying. It's no longer there. We are working together as a matter of fact. And what our goal is right now as psychologists is to see where is our place in the national question of mental health in this country? How can we take that place? How can we support other people who've also been working in it? And how can we actually become better? Because we need to increase our training. We need to be able to be as professional as possible, as ethical as possible. We need to be recognized wherever we are, but not just as a form of entitlement, but because we deserve a seat at that table through our professionalism. So for me, what I'll say is that that's probably a political question. However, I want to say that we're working all of us together, and it will begin by us getting our board firmly and in control. And I know that Dr. Njuguna will talk about that. And I think that other people who've been here, we all agree. And in fact, let me also tell psychologists on behalf of psychiatrists, and I think the psychiatrists will also back me up, Prof. This one is yours and Dr. Jenga. Everybody wants there to be a board of psychology, because in the past, psychiatrists have said that how do they know they're working with somebody who is legitimate? If you do not have registration from the government, it's very difficult for you to really say that you're actually good at what you do. And so that's why we need to really fight for it. Everybody's on our side as we speak. And once we get that registration done, I can promise you we're going to actually have only but better days ahead. Thank you so much.
Priscilla, before you take any other questions, I have a question for you. What is the result of the poll that you've just done?
The poll for happiness?
Yes.
Yes. Joy, kindly give us the results for the poll. She's following it keenly.
Yeah, I've seen on the chat a comment by one of the more prominent psychologists. I think her name is Kirindi, saying that happiness is a spectrum, and of course it's a spectrum. So next time you ask a question, you must ask about now, not about next week or next month or 2 years ago. But what is the result now?
The results are 62% have said yes and 37% have said no.
Okay, so the happiness wins. Happiness wins at 52%. Lukoya, do you have a comment on the happiness of the people who are listening to you?
Thank you very much. I want to agree with one person who says that happiness is a continuum, and the best way of measuring it would be to look at on a scale and say, where do you place yourself? But yeah, it is interesting to see that most of the people attending this webinar, commenting on that question, indicates that they feel some degree of happiness. So that is a beginning. I think going forward, it is useful to have a scale and see where people place themselves on a scale of 1 to 10. Just how happy do you feel? So that would be, I think, an even more interesting way of doing it.
Mm. What I find fascinating is that about a third, 32%, actually declare themselves to be not happy.
Yeah.
That's an interesting place for us to be looking at, because we really would like to know why a third of people participating today would answer no. What I find even more fascinating is what about the balance? What's happening to the other people? Are they kind of in a continuum? Are they not sure, or are they? Priscilla, do you have any idea what the other group is thinking?
Maybe they're in the continuum. They're like, or maybe they're not also so sure. They're like, am I really happy now? Was I
So they're
happy
playing
yesterday?
around. Oh,
Yes.
This is fascinating. Good. Okay, now we have 3 more minutes. If you're going to keep time in the way that I think we must moving forward. So I will very quickly ask Dr. Juguna to say one quick word, then Oscar, then Professor Atwoli, and then I will say my last word, and I think that will need to leave it there until next week. Simon Juguna?
Just one thing, as Dr. Njuguna comes on, there's a bit of questions on just the county governments and the national government and the interlink. So maybe you could answer that as you wrap up.
But we are on next week, don't worry. So this is a series of webinars. Yeah, Dr. Juguna, your closing remarks?
Yeah, so thank you, Dr. Frank Jenga. There were 1 or 2 questions which were raised, and many to respond to them. I know there's quite a lot of effort at the government level trying to see that we have the establishment of the counselors and psychologists board. I know I've had a conversation with the chairs from all the associations around this matter, and I think we'll be looking at it as we move forward, even having discussion with the appointing authority to see that we are able to achieve that. So that's an administrative actions which we should be able to achieve, and we say the task force report has at least achieved one of its key recommendations. So thank you to everyone who has participated in this forum. We look forward to having more discussions around this. Thank you.
Oscar?
Thank you very much. Again, thank you, our chair. And to everybody who's been on this webinar, thank you so much. I really do appreciate your interest in mental health in this country and supporting our people. I just want to say that I think the age of pessimism is ending. And I think a new optimism around mental health is beginning in this country, where we're all working together and where we're going to achieve a lot of things together. And as Dr. Jenka has said, we have many other platforms that are going to be there in the coming weeks. So we'll have opportunities to dig a bit deeper into our topic. So thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you.
Okay, Lukoe.
Thank you very much. I want to thank the organizers of the webinar, the team, and the participants for the very enlightening questions. I will just close by reiterating my earlier call that mental health is everyone's business, and you cannot achieve your own happiness by sitting in a cocoon and doing things for yourselves, and that it is important to have a system in place that ensures that the opportunities for the average person to be happy are there. So anybody you're putting in a place of responsibility or authority must have your happiness and well-being at the front and center of their agenda. And if we do that, we will improve our aggregate happiness as a country. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to thank the Secretariat. Priscilla, you've done an excellent job. You have exceeded certainly my expectations on your performance. I think we will announce the date and venue of our next webinar. But from all of us, to all of you who have attended today, thank you so much for attending, and we'll talk to you again soon. I can confirm that you have attended in hundreds. Hundreds of you have attended today. So thank you so much. This is really wonderful. Thank you, Priscilla. Thank you, the team, panelists, and those who have attended the webinar today. Kwaherini, asanteni sana. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.